Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome in. My name's Jason Priester of the Clemson Insider. Want to say big thank you to everybody that's tuned in tonight. Big thank you to our sponsor over at A Glass, two locations right here in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter. Give them a call for all your auto glass needs. You know, that's where I take my vehicles when I need something done, windshields replaced, whatever it may be. Those guys been doing it a long time. You can get yourself a free quote anytime. myaglass.com. Can you smell it? Football's kind of in the air. Teams actually back to practice and had their first practice Thursday. They're actually wrapping up a practice right now as we speak. We were the media was allowed to watch in the first 6.5 periods on Thursday, the first 6.5 periods on Friday, and we will get to see the first part on Wednesday when they move out to Jervey Field. So we've gotten and let me be very clear, it's a very small window, very small sample size. They let us see some of the individual drills and stuff. We've got to see a little bit of punting. Don't know what you guys have seen on that. And from what I've seen, it's not been bad. It's not been great. Kind of, okay. The best punt I've seen so far came off the foot of McCune. It was about a 52, 53 yarder. Had a hang time of about 5. One of us clocked it at 4.8. I clocked it at 5.0. But to me, the most consistent so far, and to me, it's not even close, has been Robert Gunn. He's not booming on 50 yards, but he's getting them, 43, 44, 45, but with a lot of hang time. I didn't think to start timing them until like the last couple of punts we saw on Friday, so I didn't time any of his, but he's by far got the best hang time of the bunch. Smith, the ball just seems to come off of his foot a little more smoothly than the rest of the guys. I would have Jack Smith behind him and McCune in third, but that's just me. A couple of my colleagues that have watched alongside of me kind of tend to agree that Gunn, from the little bit what we've seen, has had the best camp so far. First 2 days saw Gideon Davidson still kind of last in the rotation in some of the drills we were watching. Not that that means anything. Not that I would have really expected anything different. I would be very surprised if we got 3 weeks from now and he's still at the back of the rotation. Randall was at the front of the line. Man, he looks really good. He's up to 235 is what he told us the other day. If you listen to him, he thinks he's coming along pretty well with the pass protection and stuff. It's not all foreign to him, seeing as he's just not played running back. He's been at receiver, and he's made it a point to kind of learn as much as he can about the offense in general, not just the position he was playing. So that will, help him out some in that regard. Keith Adams was second in the rotation. I want to say Jarvis Green was third. Don't hold me to that. I don't have any of my notes right here. One of the biggest surprises to me was on Thursday and Friday when I made it over to the defensive tackles. Amari Adams was running in the second group alongside Stephon Green behind Peter Woods and DeMonte Capehart, obviously. But again, I'll say the same thing that I said about Gideon being at the back. I just wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into that right now. We'll see what the rotations are like once the season starts, even though we won't. I'm not going to say once we get towards the end of practice, because we're not going to be allowed, unless something changes, we're not going to be allowed in to see anymore after Wednesday. But thought that was interesting, man. I think the offensive line is going to take a jump this year. I spent some time watching them Friday. I don't know. It's just like Matt Luke's kind of transformed the mindset in that room. Kind of, you always hear about the word culture at Clemson, but I think he's kind of changed the culture inside the offensive line room. I think he's changed the mentality of that group. Man, they look like they're going to be really good, man. A couple of those freshmen look really good, man. Easton Ware looks, Braden Jacobs gets a lot of the attention because he's 6'7", 350 pounds or whatever it is. We don't know any of these guys' weights because Clemson didn't put the weights out from the big weigh-in the other day, which is a different than what they've done in years past. Dabo Sweeney told us the other day he didn't even know they released those weights until the other day. Yeah, well, I thought that was interesting. But Easton Ware looked, to me, he looked really good. Watson Young's in a big, as you would expect, in a big bulky knee brace. Doesn't seem to be, hampering him any bit. But man, those two, Easton Ware and Braden Jacobs, were the two freshmen that really stuck out to me, man. Tristan Smith, I buy into him a little bit more every time I see him. He has changed to number 3 now that Marquez Henderson's no longer wearing that number. Tristan Smith will be wearing that one. But yeah, we can go any direction you want to go. I say it every week. I don't know why I say it. You guys already know that. Any questions you got, I'll do my best to answer them. Again, we get short windows. We're out there probably for 45 minutes to an hour, and we're trying to make our way to hit every position. So we get small windows into each group and move on. And I've been overly impressed with what from what I've seen from Tristan Smith. He's so open to coaching, man, and he's always it seems like every time I looked over there, man, or watch him for a few minutes, he's getting all these pointers from Lonnie Galloway. He looks like he's been a big part of getting Tristan ready to go. Will help. This is the first time I remember back in the spring. I don't remember seeing him up close. I see him from across the field and stuff, but not like up close. You don't realize how big that dude is until you get up on him. Still, I think it's going to be important that both those ends stay healthy. And man, I'm telling you, I have not stopped hearing enough positive about Jeremiah Alexander. No idea what his role is going to be yet. But man, to his teammates talk him up. We got to talk to him a little bit. It was the first day. I thought he was, everybody talks about his work ethic, how it's rubbed off on everybody else on the team. He got a little insight into where it began. He's been like that his whole life, got it from his daddy, man. They started when he was young in like youth league, he said, but it's kind of, he was rooming with Peter Woods when he got to Clemson, and it immediately rubbed off on Woods. And then, it just kind of trickled down to everybody else. So I've been pretty impressed by what I've seen from all the transfers, and there's definitely a few of the freshmen. Again, I wouldn't read too much into Gideon at the back of the rotation at this point, because I doubt very seriously he's going to stay there. Thank you to the coaches for voting Clemson lower and being so high on the SEC and the Big Ten and the top 10. Well, I mean, we kind of probably all knew it was going to be very Big Ten, SEC heavy, right? I kind of expected Clemson to be probably somewhere between 4 and 6, and they ended up at 6. I can't say I was all that surprised with where they ended up slotting the season opener against LSU. LSU's in the top 10, so that'll be a top 10 matchup. South Carolina comes in. Matter of fact, LSU's at number 9. South Carolina's at 13th. Not a ton of surprises that came out of that deal for me. I figured Texas would be number 1, even though they got a brand new quarterback. I fully expected Penn State to be in the top 5 because they got their quarterback coming back. So not anything that jumped off at me as being overly surprising. We all know it's going to be a big SEC and Big Ten flavor to that thing, particularly in the preseason polls, because that way when you rank them so high, you can say that they're beating up on each other. And when one loses, they don't have to drop them too far. A lot of Penn State fans think they have upgraded at defensive coordinator. Well, I mean, football tends to bring out the illogical in people. And I know that I don't think Tom Allen and Franklin were getting along. I shouldn't say getting along all that great, but I don't get the impression that he was overly thrilled with being, put up in the box during the middle of the season. If I'm remembering that right, they moved him from the field to the box. Just not sure they meshed. But bringing in Knowles, that's a pretty good addition. He's a pretty good defensive coordinator. If Clemson hadn't gone out and hired that guy, it'd have been just a thrill. But I think Clemson got the guy they needed, and there's really no shame in going out and hiring Jim Knowles to replace Tom Allen. But I think Clemson's defensive room was in bad need of a leader. For as smart as at the X's and O's as Wes is, was, however you want to say it. I just don't know that he's at that point in his career where he's going to be able to lead a group of coaches that include veterans like Mike Reed, who's coached for so long, has so much more experience than him. And all those coaches in there have way more experience than Wes did. And as long as everything was going good, it was probably going to be fine. But once things started going off the rails, I think that's when the problems started arose. I get it, man. People will wonder and it's the first thing the players talk about a lot too, is how fiery Tom Allen is. And, there's never a downside to having a fiery defensive coordinator. But to me, that's Wes's firiness was way down on the list of things that were the issue last year. Kind of gotten a little off topic there, but I would fully expect Penn State fans to think they upgraded a defensive coordinator. I don't think there's any argument that Clemson upgraded a defensive coordinator, which needed to happen. Update on Adam Randall. Just one second. I think so. From the little bit we've seen, man, we've seen everything you want to see out of it. Again, we're watching individual drills and stuff, so we're not really seeing a lot of like good on good or how he's managing to pick up the pass protection stuff. We're just not seeing a lot of that. I have talked to a couple of people who tell me they have been very pleased with where he is in that regard. For me, the biggest thing is you want to come out of camp with at least a couple of guys that you can trust to go out there and give them the ball or put them on the field in passing situations against LSU. At minimum, a couple, man. I'd feel if I'm Clemson, I feel a lot better if I had at least three. Um, I don't think you need to have one guy that carries the load like they were planning on doing with Maffa last year until he got hurt. I think you're better set to have two or three of those guys that you can run out there in a pinch if you need to. But so far, I mean, he absolutely looks the part. Um, he's not. I saw somewhere the other day that said he runs a 4.4. I don't know about all that. I don't know if he was a 4.4 guy even before the ACL and his other knee was worked on a little bit. You don't need your running back to be a burner. I think you got a guy in Gideon Davison that's a threat to take it to the house every time he touches it. I think that you're going to have a pretty good 1-2 tandem there by the time the season rolls around. It might start out with Randall getting the bulk of the work with some of those other guys mixed in. But I think the further we get into the season, the more we'll see of Davidson, and the roles kind of might reverse between the two. If you can get 600 yards out of that guy, man, I think you got to be thrilled. But man, so far he looks the part. Any recruiting updates? Well, I guess everybody saw that Shavar Young says he's shutting it down. The cornerback who'd been committed since last summer, and all the rumors about him potentially flipping to SMU or Michigan or whoever it was seemed to be LSU. SMU was the team where some of those national guys were pointing it at. I'll say this, I think I touched on this last week, but back in January, he had a bunch of schools come through visiting him, during the contact period. SMU was one, Oregon was one. I remember Dan Lanning came by there, and there were several more. I want to say Michigan was one, but don't hold me to that. And, he was very public about it. He was tweeting out the photos. Mom was retweeting them and all that good stuff. And I remember I talked to him in February. If a guy has fully shut it down, he's probably not putting those photos with other coaches out on social media. So I don't know that he's ever fully shut it down going back to the beginning of the year. Because I just, when some of those stories came out a couple of weeks ago, I was not shocked at all. If there was one guy I was kind of watching with one eye, it was him. Just because all that attention he was getting and all that attention he was allowing himself to get. Fast forward to the summer, that stuff really amps up, and it's a lot of the same schools that were visiting him back during the contact period. Again, last night he comes out and says he shut it down. Last February, he kind of told me something similar in an interview we did with him. He wasn't going anywhere. He was locked in. Don't worry. Clemson fans don't have anything to worry about. And, he did an interview with one of the national guys yesterday. I think it was Chad Simmons, maybe, telling him that now he's fully locked down. So, I still think he's a guy worth keeping one eye on, regardless of whether he's saying it's shut down or not. There were a couple of other guys who came out in the last week or two saying they had shut things down. Remember, one of them was Kentavion Anderson, the safety from right here in South Carolina. I had never really even heard a peep about him potentially flipping or flirting with anybody else, and he's coming out saying he's shutting it down. So, but as far as recruiting updates, the young thing is probably the biggest thing. Starting to put together, a list of the guys that are planning to visit for the LSU game, and it's going to be a long list, man. there's going to be a lot of recruits at that game and some big names at that. Let's see here. I got them right here somewhere if I can find them. Here we go. Cornerback Jaden Aparicio Bailey. I think I'm saying that right. He's supposed to be there. He told me back in June he was planning to come that game. 5-star corner Josh Dobson's told me he's coming. 4-star running back Andrew Beard told me he's coming. 5-star linebacker Caden Henderson has said he's coming. Defensive end Santana Harvey says he's coming. Offensive lineman Jaden Dean says he's coming. I've seen one of the national guys that said the big-time offensive lineman Kennedy Brown's coming. The in-state running back Trey Segarra, who's the only guy to hold an offer, or only running back to hold an offer from Clemson in 2027, is coming. And that list will continue to grow as we get closer to that game. But it should be a pretty star-studded list. Where's Oregon getting all their NIL money? They got the Nike guy, man, Phil Knight. Phil Knight. Does anybody look does anybody look noticeably different from last year? Peter Woods would be the one that comes, to the top of my mind. You can tell that he has really put in a lot of work, man. He said, if I'm remembering right, back in the spring, that he had put on some, what I would call bad weight during the season last season, and he had got upwards of 330-something pounds. He told us at the ACC kickoff he was 307. I think they did show a clip of him weighing in. Clemson did, and he was 309, and he looks phenomenal. It looks like DeMonte Capehart slimmed down a little bit, but I couldn't say for sure how much, unless I knew how much he was weighing currently. But he looks like he's at least toned down or slimmed down some. But Peter Woods would definitely be the one that comes to mind. On the other end of that, you look at the freshman Juju Preston, man, and he's this big around. There's a guy that's going to need a year or maybe 2 years in the weight room. Power hour is going to be real good for him. Any thoughts on other starting defensive tackle outside of Woods? How's Burley coming along? DeMonte Capehart would be the guy. But I think you're going to see them rotate a lot. Kind of like I've been saying about the receivers, that Clemson likes to rotate those interior defensive linemen. We've seen it. And just because Tom Allen's here, I wouldn't expect that to change a whole lot. You want to keep those guys fresh. It's been, it just in the drills, it's been Stephon Green and Amari Adams that are kind of running in that second group. Burley's been behind those four guys in the drills. I'm trying to remember if he was in the third group or the fourth group. I can't remember. But again, I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into that. Burley has spent the first 2 seasons he's been on campus. A lot of that he's been injured. Kind of put him behind. It's a big fall camp for him. He's one that I would have loved to have seen what he weighed in at last week. He's one I was really interested in seeing his weight, because you'd be able to tell by what he weighs. You get a good idea of how much work he's been putting in. Dabo talked a little bit about him last week, right before the start of camp. Talking about that he's a guy that they could benefit from getting some contribution this year. and they could, you know, the guy's got the talent. It's just a matter of putting it all together. But we'll have a better idea on that a little bit later. It's hard to put a stamp on that kind of stuff, 2 practices in. Think Green and Haynes will get their numbers called as much or more outside of running. You know what? I should have mentioned Haynes earlier because he looks like he's really close, probably closer than I thought he'd be. He was, he's in a green jersey, which means he can do all the stuff. He just no contact. He can go through all the drills and everything. I would be surprised if he's not ready to roll game one, just based on unless he has a setback or something, just based on what we saw the first 2 practices. Again, and he might very well end up proving me wrong. I've said this before, and what I'm about to say, I've said before. I'm not sure I see him as an every down back, but I do see him as a guy that can help. And he's a guy that he is one of those guys that they kind of have built up some trust in when it comes to the pass protection and stuff. So yeah, I think you're going to see some of Haynes. The question becomes how much do we see Green, and it goes back to there being one ball. I don't think we're going to see them rotating in, 4 running backs. I just, you're not going to get any continuity that way. My guess is he'd probably be on the outside looking in at this point. Trying to think. I don't think we saw any kickoff returns yet, so I can't really say who was working that. If they did them, I didn't see them. We saw some punt returns, and it was Antonio and the guys that have always been there. But we'll see on Green. He's still technically an underclassman as a redshirt sophomore. He did tell us the other day, we got to talk to him a little bit, and he did say that, getting a little taste of it in the playoff game against Texas, has gotten him more. So we'll see if he can take advantage of that and beat some of these other guys out. Where does EZ fit in the running backs? Yeah, I don't know yet. He's kind of been toward the back of the rotation back there with Gideon still. And like I said about Green, being a redshirt sophomore, he's still a redshirt freshman. He's he's only been on the team 1 year now, or in the system 1 year now. He the other day when the media was talking to him, he was talking about how last year he felt like he was swimming with fish in a lake. I thought that was a pretty apt description of a guy that was just, kind of a little bit over his head as a freshman, trying to catch up and let the speed of the game slow down and acclimate and all that stuff, man. I think just based on what I've seen, I think he's in the process of doing that. We got some glimpses of it in the spring game. I think he averaged 6-point-something yards per carry in the spring game, had a touchdown, if I'm remembering right. He's a guy that I think's got a lot of upside. And if he's got the offense grasped, the pass protection's down, now I could see him passing Green by because I think he's got that kind of talent. I think his ceiling's that high. He's one of the biggest things that stands out to me about him is sometimes he still runs a little too upright, but that's something they've been working on. It's going to be interesting to see where he kind of slides into the pecking order once we get to the season. excited to see how Allen uses Alexander after all this praise. Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see exactly what the plan for him is too. Somebody asked Dabo the other day about the nickel and the Sam, and Dabo's answer was, it just depends on, and I think they were asking about Alexander and the nickel to say, could he slide there? And I remember Dabo talking about how you wouldn't want him being stuck. I think he said covering Antonio or a guy like Antonio in the slot, which is 100% true. But he said it would depend on the game plan, the opponent, and the scheme, and all those kind of things. But I think Alexander kind of sees himself more as an inside backer, and with his body type, I probably do too. But I do think there are different ways you can use him. I think he can play Mike. I think he can play Will. I think you could stand him up on the edge and let him rush the passer. I think there are different things you can do with him. Fully expect Woodaz and Sammy to be the two starting backers. But it's going to be I am very anxious to see what the plan is for him, because they didn't bring that guy in to sit the bench. I fully expect him to play. It's just a matter of how much and where they slide him in at. It's Tom Allen lighting a fire on the defense. You can hear Tom Allen's got one of the mics. One guy's got a mic on this side, on this practice field, and then all the way on the other side of the facility, Tom Allen's got the mic on this side. And when you walk over to that side, all you hear is Tom Allen saying, we're going to be the best tackling team in America. We're going to be the best tackling team in America. And I'm sure everybody's seen the videos of them talking about how, they have to do up downs for every loaf that is caught on tape during practice and stuff. And it was kind of neat listening to some of those guys talk about that back in Charlotte at the kickoff. I think it was TJ Parker saying like the most they had to do was, I want to say he said 60 something. Whatever the number was. I remember him saying he wasn't there that day. But, it didn't take him long to get that number down and all the way to, I think he says 7 or something like that. And you never want to be the guy that makes the whole team do up downs. But, yeah, there seems to be a new sense of energy in there, man. How do you think QB would play out next year? I believe the underrated QB from Florida would win the job in 26. If you're talking about Denson, he's got a long ways to go, man. I don't know. To me, if I had to guess right now, it's going to be Vizina. The guy has remained loyal to Clemson. He has stayed as the backup for 3 years now, or he's been the number 2 for couple years now. He's been at Clemson patiently waiting his turn 3 years. He's going to get every opportunity to win the job. I watched Denson some the other day, and he's still very raw. He's not going to get a ton of reps, once fall camp ends. Most of those are going to go to the 1s and the 2s, and Vizina's absolutely the backup. Make no mistake. One of the things he's got to me that I see that I think he still has to work on is he throws flat footed. That you don't want your quarterback throwing flat footed. He's got a lot of the tools, man. There's a lot to like about him, but he's still plenty raw, and I don't know if he'll get there in a year. If I had to guess or make a prediction right now, I'd go with Vizina. He's been in the offense. He'll have been in the offense for 3 years by then. Same offensive coordinator, same system. He'll have a leg up on Denson and Tate Reynolds. But some of that's going to depend where Tate is when he gets to campus and exactly how much growth Denson takes. as a freshman. Next spring will be big for Denson, though. Because even if he doesn't beat out Vizina, somebody's got to be the number 2. Somebody's got to be the next man up. Is it going to be, would it be Denson or Tate? Any word on Jaden Lucas? We haven't heard what it was, but he was in yellow Friday. He was not in yellow Thursday. The guy just cannot catch a break, man. I feel bad for him. He's had shoulder issues. He's had a hamstring issue. I'll never forget seeing him walking around there. I think it was the year before last, man, on those crutches. I think after he had something done to his hamstring, if I'm remembering right. Guy just needs a little bit of luck. But I tell you what it does do. If he's out for a little bit, he didn't seem too hurt. He was walking around fine and stuff, but he's just in a yellow jersey. That creates opportunity for Corey and Gibson, who I think's got an extremely high ceiling, is going to end up being a very good corner at Clemson. Where did Al Golden go? He is the defensive coordinator of the Bengals. Just my opinion, but I think Dabo was fine with Wes's 2023 results in general, expecting to step up in 24. After Louisville, Dabo probably already knew he was going to change coaches. Yeah, I think the results you got in year 1 and year 2 were fine. Year 1, the pass defense needed to improve. They did that in year 2, but man, it just all fell off a cliff last year, man. And yeah, the Louisville game was really the first, big red flag, because it's not like they were doing anything exotic. They were just lining it up and running it at them, and they could not stop it, man. It was infuriating to watch. When Citadel runs for 300 yards on you, man, there's your sign. It'd be one thing if that was the only time you gave up that many yards, all season long, because they're running misdirection and option and you're not seeing a lot of it. But it was just one more example in a long list of examples of where they couldn't stop the run. You look at the South Carolina game, you look at what Texas did to them, it just over and over again. But yeah, I don't know if Dabo had made up his mind after the Louisville game, but that's probably when you start thinking about, hey, this is something I might have to do. I might need to start preparing myself. And the more it happened, the further you get to cementing that decision. Could Ian Shefflin be used on the field goal team to block kicks? I don't know. Possibly. I can't say for sure one way or the other. It's funny, when he's with the basketball program, they've got him listed at 6'8", 235, 240, and now he's with the football team. He's listed at 6'7" and like 260 something. We'll see what kind of role he has, if any. I would almost bet money on there's going to be some point that Dabo gets him out on the field, and at the very least gets him out on the field to get him a catch or something. To me, he looks like a guy that's really knocking some rust off. He's not played football, I think, since the 10th grade. He's been at Clemson 4 years, so that's 6 years he's not played football. Watching him go through some of the drills, he looks like he's doing them in slow motion to make sure he's getting them right. It's a lot to soak up. But he's athletic, he's big. If he can soak some of it up, and or at least soak enough of it up to where he can get out there on the field a little bit, man, he's a matchup problem, that's for sure. But I can't answer that about the blocking kicks thing, man. Just some of that'll probably just depend on him, and if he's any good at it. He's surely tall enough to be. That's the kind of guy you want to make. That's the kind of height you want to make a kicker kick over. When West took Sammy Brown out during South Carolina game, that was the final nail. Yeah, and then you gotta love Dabo's explanation after the game. We thought they were going to start doing something else or something to that effect, but yeah, that was a disaster, man. Just a disaster. And Sam, I'll never forget Sammy's standing there and basically in Wes's back pocket the entire fourth quarter. Wherever Wes was, Sammy was right behind him, just standing right on top of him. And I think he was on the field for like 3 plays. While they overcome the deficit they were facing, come back, score the go-ahead touchdown. All the while, Sammy is watching from the sidelines. And remember, Woodaz had just come back from an injury. He had this nasty, nasty thigh bruise. I remember he showed it to us in the media room one day, man. He showed us that or he showed us a picture of it. I can't remember if he showed us a picture of it. I think he did. Might have showed us both, but man, it was nasty. I have no doubt that he was not 100% that day. And you got your other, best linebacker sitting there watching. It's, kind of unexplainable, to be quite honest. Heard that Adam looks like a fast James Davis. I've been seeing some people online trying to compare him to Derrick Henry. I don't know that I've seen one to James Davis. But I don't want to sit here and pretend like Randall was like the fleetest of foot at receiver. He kind of sometimes looked like he was playing in quicksand, to be quite honest, particularly as a sophomore. Didn't really see a whole lot of him as a junior, but after that Georgia game. But again, I don't think you have to be a burner to play running back. There are hundreds of examples of running backs that don't have elite speed that were elite backs. I saw somebody else up in the comments talking about him running too high. The guy's 6'3", he's going to run high. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. He does not. I can tell you, he's not one that runs standing straight up, upright, kind of like EZ does sometimes. Man, I mean, he's kind of got it. To me, he looks like he's getting it down as low as he can for a guy his size. But just not going to know till we know. Unfortunately, you don't have a Citadel or a Wofford or somebody like that in the season opener where you can run him out there and get his feet wet and get him warmed up before they play LSU, man. It's all on. It's on game number one. LSU is going to put some elite wide receivers out there game one. Kind of no starters at cornerback on each side, but any sleepers so far in camp at corner. I would just Corey and Gibson would be the name for me. He kind of got to camp, or he got to campus last year as a freshman. He was, if I'm remembering right, he was coming off of ACL. He was hurt. I can't remember the specific injury, so I better not say what it was. But he was hurt, and it set him back a little bit. I think he played in a couple of games like early in the season, and then we never saw him again. He's a guy that they said he's fully healthy in the spring, so you expect him to start taking that jump back then. And by all accounts, from what I've heard, he has. If he's put it all together, he's a guy that I expect to see on the field this year. Mike Reed has proven time and again that he's got no problems giving his younger, inexperienced guys a chance. I don't know that I'm not saying that means we'll see him against LSU, because obviously that's going to be – it might be the best group of receivers you see all year because they got dudes at wide receiver. To me, that's why it's imperative you take advantage of that brand new offensive line they got there. They lost 4 of their starters from last year. They replaced a couple of them with guys from out of the portal, but they also got a couple that are very inexperienced. This is the game where Clemson's defensive line has to step up and prove that they are what most think they are. Because if you get those receivers enough time, they're going to burn any secondary. You can't give them the time to do it. Also saw where Bryant Wesco has put on a good bit of weight. Hopefully it'll help him sustain more hits and while also not losing his speed. Yes, somebody said on here last week or the week before that they'd heard Wesco had put on 20 pounds. He looks like he's put on about 10, which to me is about where you want him right now. He was at 185 last year, and I think Dabo said he was 195-ish, 196. I think is how he said it. So it sounds like he's put on about 10 pounds. He looks like he's gotten stronger more so than he's added a bunch of bulk. And I think that's kind of what you wanted him to do over the offseason, is add some strength to where he can fight off some of that press coverage at the line of scrimmage. I think that's probably against some of the better DBs. That's something he probably struggled with a little bit last year at times. I mean, make sure I say at times because it wasn't all the time, but I think he's added some strength, man. It looks like he's added about 10 pounds, and based on what Dabo said the other day, that sounds about right. TJ Moore will be a close second to Antonio Williams in receiving yards, TDs by the end of the season. Wesco gets talked about more, and he's great, but TJ seems to be a better all-around receiver. I think by the time I got to be careful how I say this because I want to make sure I'm not putting one down. I think Moore is probably the more well-rounded receiver. He's probably not quite as fast as Wesco, obviously. I think that's probably one of the areas Wesco has him beat in. But man, he's just getting better and better with his route running, man. I kind of tend to agree by the time they leave Clemson, TJ's going to be that dude. I think he is going to have as good as he was last year, I think he's going to have a breakout year. That's not discounting Wesco. I just think just how highly I think of Moore. But you also have to remember that Antonio's kind of evolved into Cade's safety valve, man. Every time Cade needs a play, except in the fourth quarter of that South Carolina game. Outside of that, though, seems like every time Cade or Clemson the offense needs a play, they look to Antonio. Especially on third downs. So I'm not going to make a prediction on who's going to have the most receiving yards or anything like that. But man, I think by the time the season's over, a lot of people that don't already know TJ Moore's name will, because I think he's going to have a very good year. Where did the comp come in from Adam Rand? Look, Google it. Somebody wrote it up the other day. I don't remember where it came from. I've seen it a few times, though. Are we looking too highly at Randall over running backs on the roster? I think you're looking that highly at Randall because right now he seems to have, he seems to have the inside track to the starting job. That's just where we are at this point, and that's why he's the one that's getting the bulk of the attention. He came out of the spring atop the depth chart. He went into the fall atop the imaginary depth chart because we haven't really literally got one. But if he's not the guy that is leading the way, he's not leading the way into drills. To me, the only question is, can he hold off Gideon? Because I fully expect him to be the guy, the starter week one. I also think it was interesting the other day when he was asked about a younger guy who was really standing out. He mentioned Gideon. That's the guy he said he thought was standing out and talked about how good he was going to be. So it gives you kind of some insight into how his mind works. And he's a guy that's really humble, man. He's not a me guy. That's kind of the way he's always been since I've known him in high school. I knew him a little bit in high school anyways, but that's why he's getting all the attention, because he's the guy that's at the front of the pack right now. Any reason to expect Wesco will be good or really good on route running? Unless don't blasting down the field. I can't. There's nothing I've seen in practice that would answer that one way or the other. That is something he absolutely needed to work on, as well as not getting jammed at the line of scrimmage and not being able to fight that stuff off. That's why I think he needed to get a little bit stronger. He was definitely beating a lot of the coverage with his speed last year. One of the next steps for him is obviously becoming a, what's the word I'm looking for? More concise route runner, more precise route runner, so he doesn't always have to lean on that speed. I think that's going to be a big thing for him this year. Thoughts on Tate Reynolds with a hot summer so far? I'm not sure what you're asking me there. You asked me about his base. I don't know what you're asking me. I know he went and competed in the Elite 11, and depending on, what guy's stuff you're reading, one guy thought he did really well. Somebody else thought he was up and down. He did finish in the top 11. Not that they rank them in any order, but they just kind of, the Elite 11 itself names the MVP and then puts out a list of the Elite 11 in alphabetical order, and Tate was on that. But I've always been high on Tate, man. He's got a lot of the tools, man, and he's built like a tank. I think he's kind of one of those true dual threat guys. We'll see. We'll see what kind of if he can take the same kind of jump as a junior and take that same if he can take that same kind of jump as a senior, similar to what he did as a junior, man, he should kind of vault up some of these recruiting rankings. He probably won't since he's already committed, but he had a really good junior year, man. And I would expect nothing less as a senior. Um, but we'll see where he is when he gets here and whether or not he's going to realistically or be a realistic option to win the job once Cade leaves. Josh Payton Clemson preview was very skeptical. I don't pay any attention to what Josh Payton says. No, it's way too early, but who do you think challenges CU in the ACC championship game? I picked Louisville. I picked the rematch of Louisville. That's who I picked to finish second in the league. I picked SMU to finish third. If I had to pick one game on the schedule right now, and I've said this before, that I think Clemson could potentially lose or will potentially lose, is that one in Louisville on Friday night. I could easily see that being a rematch. I think Louisville is going to be good, man. I think in the ACC preseason poll they didn't. I think they're going to be a little bit better than what they were picked. Will this be Tristan Smith's only season? Yes, he's only got, as of right now, unless he, files a waiver or files a suit, as of right now, this is his final year of eligibility. Would Tyler Boyd leave? Oh, I'm guessing you're asking me about Tyler Brown. Would Tyler Brown leave after a good year given his injury history? My guess would be probably not. I would fully expect Tyler Brown back next year. That is fair until someone goes out there and does it, but I'm excited for that. I think our running back room is going to be fun to watch. Yeah, I think I think everybody's kind of in wait and see mode on that. That's what happens when you have some inexperience and guys you've just not seen a lot of, right? Doesn't mean the ground game's going to suck. Doesn't mean it's going to be elite. I probably would see it at least starting on somewhere around in the middle. I mean, I don't think it's going to be terrible, but I don't see them going out and rushing for 150, 200 yards on LSU either. I mean, I think it's going to be a work in progress until some guys get solidified into roles and until you can get the freshman really up to speed with where he needs to be. So, I mean, to me, you want to see improvement, from the start of the season to the end of the season. But again, you're just not going to know, man, until you get out there and do it. I fully expect the offensive line to do their part. I am really high on that group this year, man. You got 4 starters coming back, plus you got guys that have already played a lot of football that could slide into that spot left open by Marcus Tate. I mean, and they're moving some guys around. Harris Sewell's been working at center. He's I think he's already played over 1,000 snaps at guard already. Colin Sadler's played a good bit for you. Elijah Thurman's back and healthy. I'm kind of anxious to see who wins that role or that job. Maybe Chef can catch end zone fades like Plaxico Burress in the Super Bowl. He certainly got the height or the size and the height to go up and win some of those jump balls. That's for sure. But we'll see, man. I think expectations for Ian are probably a little unrealistic right now for some people. I think for those that have really high expectations of him having this big impact, they probably need to be tempered a little bit at this point. Not saying it's out of the realm of possibility, but I certainly wouldn't bet on it. Does Randall play a role similar to Debo with the 49ers? I don't watch a lot of NFL, so he was kind of asked about that the other day, and he did say he's been watching a lot of Debo. He also said he's been watching a lot of Cordell Patterson. I think Randall's going to be a running back that can, kind of motion outside or line up out wide from time to time, but I think he's going to be a running back. Is that what Debo is for the 49ers? I quit watching the NFL, or all but quit watching the NFL a few years ago, but I don't think you're going to see him lined up in a bunch of different spots. I think he's going to be a running back, and I think he's going to get a lot of carries. Breakout players for the football team. Yeah, I think I've talked about this before, but tonight I'm gonna go with Bettinger on offense. I think that guy's gonna be hard to keep off the field. I think he's got that high of a ceiling. On defense, I don't want to go with the obvious with anybody that's expected to start. I think Ricardo Jones is going to be a fixture on the back end, and I have this sneaking suspicion that Amari Adams is going to make it hard for them to keep him off the field too. Tyler Brown was full go as of Friday, so unless something's happened since then. Randall's running style, any similar to Herschel? I don't know. I'm not big on player comps. I actually asked him the other day about if he was trying to model his game after anybody, and he didn't really have much of a response. But yeah, I don't know. You've seen, you've probably seen as much of it as I have. We got very little. We saw very little of him in the spring game running the ball. We saw against Texas, and what I've seen so far, the first couple of days are some individual drills. So I don't know. I'm not going to say his running style is similar to Herschel Walker's. At least not yet, anyways, because that Herschel Walker is one of the best to ever do it. After the Texas game, I knew how good TJ Moore was going to be. Almost felt like when Ross went off in the natty, just a different outcome. Yeah, he started kind of putting it together the further you got into the season. For me, it was when he went off during the in the lead up to the All American Bowl, man, before his freshman season. That's kind of when I realized exactly what he could be. Um, he he's he's got the tools and he's got the potential to be a superstar, man. I mean, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism. Again, he's probably not quite as fast as Wesco, but he's got the speed. I mean, there's a reason that guy was a 5-star, man. Like I said a little while ago, I think he's going to have a breakout year. How much does Walker Parks weigh? 310. That's what they listed him at last year, 310. I doubt I would assume he's about the same. How does defensive line depth look? It depends on which spot you're talking about. I think you're good on the interior. I think you can go 4 or 5 and maybe even 6 deep. Because obviously it starts with Woods and K Park. Then you got Stephon Green, Maury Adams, Vic Burley. And then you got those guys that redshirted last year, Champ Thompson and Evan Brown Schuler. I mean, and I'm probably forgetting somebody, but Thompson was a guy that got a lot of praise during his first spring. Big year for Vic Burley. I would lean towards thinking the true freshman, the Williams Lee kid's going to redshirt. Man, he looked like he was swimming the other day. He wasn't an early enrollee, so these are his first practices. Caden Story was working out at defensive tackle in one of the drills I saw. They kind of been moving him back and forth. But to me, it kind of starts with those 5 guys. Woods, Capehart, Green, Adams, Burley. I mean, you ought to be able to, work out a heck of a rotation with those 5 guys. At end, it's a little bit different. You start with Parker and Will Help to transfer. But then after that, it's kind of what you've already had. Jaheim Lawson and Cade Denoff. And the wild card being Darian Mayo. That guy, man, every practice I've ever been at, it seems like Chris Rumpf is just riding his tail, man. Coaching him hard. They could really benefit from him being ready to contribute as a reserve this year. Because if Parker or Helt gets hurt, you're kind of right back where you were last year, having to rely on Lawson and Denoff. Man, if you could throw Mayo into that mix and he go out there and, be ready, it would help your depth tremendously. So we'll see where he is, but I think it's imperative that Helt and Parker stay healthy, man. Those guys have got to stay healthy. How's this year's tight end unit? Going to miss Brenningstool receiving, but his blocking could have been better. Could have been a lot better. I think Betancure's got a chance to be a special player, man. Whether that happens this year or not, I don't know. I lean towards thinking he's going to make an impact this year. But I also like Olsen Pat Henry. He has shown that he is willing to go out there and do the dirty work. Do some things that maybe Brenningstool wasn't so happy to go out there and do, or always so willing to go out there and do. So I like those 2 at the top of the depth chart. I would think Brooking's gonna take a red shirt, but man, with the receivers you have, even if you, and I expect you won't get the same kind of production from tight end that you got last year, just from a number standpoint. But you got enough receivers to be able to make up for, any drop in production with the transition from Brenny Stool to those two guys. Thought Tristan was under the umbrella for one of the other FCF suits that have him back 2 years. Yeah, no. Those have kind of been being decided on a case by case basis. But I remember Dabo being asked about it back in the spring, and they said one. Again, that could change. He could decide to file a waiver, try to get a year back, or decide to even file a lawsuit himself to get a year back. Who knows if either one of those things will happen, but those are options that are on the table. But as of right now, today, he's got this year. Here you go. Y'all want to know what to think of the tight end room? Here is a former tight end himself giving you what he thinks. And he would know much better than I would. He says they are going to surprise some folks. I think nobody knows, but I think with the returning offensive line and the elite passing game, I think it will help out a lot. Yeah, I like some of the dudes they got in that room, man. We just haven't seen a ton of them. And that's not always a bad thing. Everybody you can't have experience returning every year at every position. A guy's got to get his feet wet and start somewhere. We saw some of Pat Henry last year. I saw enough of him for me to really like. We didn't get to see much of Betancourt, but I think he's got a high ceiling too. I think Brandon also says he thinks Chef can help, although he hasn't played a lot of football. You can't replace hand-eye coordination that he has, and you can't replace 6'8". Nope, you cannot replace that. So he may help even if he is a decoy, taking an extra defender out in the box. That's a good way to think about it too. We hadn't really talked about is just running him out there as a decoy, if nothing else. See there, man, that's that football mind at work. I'm a baseball guy. Is Vizina really second string? Yes. Who else is going to be second string? The guy that's been going into his third year or the guy that just got there? Yeah, Lawson needs to, there was a lot of things to like about some of the things we saw from Lawson last year. He just needs to keep getting better with his run defense. If he can continue to progress with the way he defends against, and setting the edge, you'll be in a better spot. Absolutely. Who's the fastest on the team? Cole Turner. There you go, man. You don't ever know who might be in here watching, man. We appreciate Brandon for getting in. And I did not hear this, but I was talking to Lawton Swan the other day, who's the host of the Clemson Sports Talk Show. And he was on Radio Row there in Charlotte for the ACC kickoff. And I think he asked Peter Woods. It was one of those guys, who was the best basketball player on the team. He also said Cole Turner. All right, last one. Did they open the board at running back, or did they just give up for next year? No, they've not just given up for next year, but there's not like there's a ton of options out there. It's August, beginning of August, signing days in December. Um, that where you can't they don't do a whole lot of recruiting stuff in August. They're more focused on camp and getting ready for the opener. That stuff will amp back up once the season gets here. Jay Allen Terry, I think, told me he's going to be another one of those guys. Let me make sure before I say that 100%. I think he did tell me he's going to be here for LSU. Got to go make sure 100%. Before I tell you that, though, yeah, Jay Allen Terry, he's kind of the guy that I'm leaning towards it being at this point. He was thinking about committing during the summer, but he's pushed it off. And no, it's the same thing for linebacker. No, they've not given up on linebacker. I don't know why you would think they'd given up in August. I mean, you got these guys they ain't even played their senior years of high school yet, man. There's these guys still got a whole nother season ahead of them. But the DQ Fortpa is the kid I'd lean towards at linebacker. We won't see a 5-star. Clemson's very rarely landed any 5-star running backs, man. You're way too obsessed with 5 stars. Outside of CJ Spiller, I don't. How many of Clemson's greatest running backs were 5 stars? Saying giving up because it seems like we don't court a lot of committed guys. Not a ton, no, but it does happen. And in this era, there's been 200 and something decommitments in the 26 class so far. There's gonna be more. I know there's been a guy or two at running back that they've been kind of eyeing, hoping they decommit. So we'll see what happens. After you signed Davidson last year, I don't think it's this. You don't have to go out and sign this, superstar running back. I think you would, if you don't this class, you would need to in 27. Make no mistake. But you also have the ability to go out and get one from the portal if you need to. I mean, that's always an option. I know people think Dabo won't do it, but he showed this year that he will absolutely do it if he feels like he needs to. Still think he probably waited a year too long at defensive end, but he went out and added a depth piece to the linebacker room, which they needed. And I feel like if he feels they need a running back next year, he'll go get one. No, Andre Ellington was not a 5-star, if I'm remembering right. Anytime, Brandon. Anytime, my man. We might. I tell you what, man. I'll reach out to you one day this week, and we can get you in here. How about that? We'll let you come on one week. Yeah, Gideon Davidson wasn't even a 5-star. He was a 4-star. DeMarcus Bowman was a 5-star, but he transferred after how many games? All right, man. I'll reach out to you one day this week, Brandon. Appreciate it, bud. And wait a minute. Does Ashby? You talking about Ashby that I have on here sometimes? No, she does not play softball. Well, you know what? Shipley might have been a 5-star in one service. Hold on, and I'll tell you before we get out of here, because it seems like he was. I had forgotten about him. He was a 4-star by Rivals. No, I can't remember if he was one by the time the cycle ended or not. If he was, it'll say on Clemson's website, or it usually does. Good Lord, they got a lot of stuff on here about him. Yep, he was ranked a 5-star by 24/7 and a 4-star at the other services. So Shipley was one. And Bellamy, Bowman, two guys that never even made an impact, and then Shipley and Spiller. I almost had Gurley. Yeah, that's a conversation for a different day, man. This close. All right, appreciate everybody that tuned in tonight. Want to thank our sponsors over at A Glass. For when you need a glass, call on my pals at A Glass. 2 locations, one in Florence, one in Sumter. Take care of all your auto glass needs, replacement, repair. Get yourself a free quote today. myaglass.com. ETN was a 3-star, at least in one service, if I'm remembering right. But I think he was in a 4-star. I think he was a low 4-star in most. Let's see here. He might have been a 3-star in one service. Yeah, 24/7 has him as a 4-star. The composite has him number 216. He was like number 17 among all the running backs. Yep, Dalvin Cook was another one. All right, my friends, right back here next Monday, 7 p.m. We will have a whole lot more to talk about from fall camp and other practice we have been able to go in and see. So don't miss out. 7 o'clock, right back here next Monday.